I find it incredible how expensive some movements are when it comes to recovery points. We all know there's only so many recovery points we have. That's got a lot to do with how well we sleep, what we eat, how we eat, what do we do in our daily lives for work. Are we introverts, extroverts? How do we process stress? All that kind of comes into it. And also on top of that, it's also how you train as well. If you get slapped to the face every time you do a set, if you smash ammonia every single lift you do, if you listen to heavy metal or whatever music that you like, and you get emotionally invested in training, all of that stuff costs points. In the book by Matt Perryman, Squat Every Day, he talks about how expensive the emotional stuff is when you train. He argued that it's more expensive for recovery, the emotional aspect of training. So getting psyched up, in training, it's more demanding on recovery than the actual training that we do, the muscular fatigue and whatever. So the central nervous system is basically everything when it comes to lifting, when it comes to performance. You need to manage how excited you get in training. Last few videos I've kind of spoken about why I'm so kind of cool when I train. To be honest with you, that's kind of the reason why. When I read that book several times. I realized that if you're going to have a high frequency of training, you have to kind of control for some of these other variables, which usually kind of take points from you. We all know, you watch sports, I would say watch basketball and soccer and whatever. Those are the sports that I usually watch. And you see, the players that are kind of, that don't have a stable home, they're going out chasing tail, flicking girlfriends left, right, and center. Those guys are usually not as successful as the ones that have a stable home, a wife, kids, that kind of thing. That side has a lot to do with it as well. I'm not saying that if you don't have a wife and kids, you can't be successful. I'm just saying that's a cog in the system. When you're training, think about, tomorrow. Don't just think about today. If you smash some ammonia, you listen to heavy metal, and you go for like a 95% single, the chances are you're probably going to be quite tired tomorrow and the next day and the next day. But if you say lift 90% without any of the extra stuff, or maybe even 85%, you might come back in like a day or two. Do you know what I mean? So when you start adding some of these things up over the course of a week, a month, a year, it all starts to add up, and then you get separation from different lifters depending on what they, how they approach their training. Also the recovery, I spoke about sleep and your diet and whatever. When it comes to sleep, a lot of something like 25% of the population has sleep apnea. So if you're one of those guys who doesn't sleep well, you have apneic episode or episodes where you stop breathing throughout the night, and you have basic hypoxic. I don't want to get too technical, but you have moments where you stop breathing and you starve your body from oxygen. That impacts your recovery as well. So there's a lot of different things, and the diet as well. Like if you're eating trash all the time, if you're eating a bottle of Coke a day, all that stuff has an impact. So we all know that. But then also in the training session, aside from the emotional and the psyching up, all that stuff, there's also certain movements. For me, I've spoken about this for a very, very long time with you guys on the comments. A lot of new people on the channel now, so it's kind of good to kind of reiterate this. But for me, I know for some of you guys it's different. For me, deadlifting is by far the most expensive movement. When I do that, especially like a couple of days ago, I hit 240 PR. This is the second day now that I really, really saw erectors. I've got this systemic kind of fatigue. I don't feel strong at all. Today I worked up to a squat of 150 kilos, and that moved slow. That was heavy work. That was sluggish. My erectors are kind of like panicking. So whenever I have my spinal erectors or anything got to do with the spinal cord fatigue, some sort of core muscle, I basically have worked out a pattern that the consecutive 3, 4, 5 days, there's a dip in performance. So I need to kind of be careful of how I approach my deadlifting. This is why I've always kind of said, for me, deadlifting, it makes sense to do kind of like sub 50% or singles like at 70, 80%. But when you kind of start hitting that 95, 100%, it starts to get really expensive. And it doesn't just affect your deadlift the following kind of week. It affects everything, man. It affects the rest of your training week. You can't squat, you can't bench press, you can't lunge, you can't do Bulgarian split squats, you can't do pull-ups. Everything runs through your spinal cord. So if there is something that protects usually the spinal cord, like a spinal erector. If that gets fatigued, there are sensory mechanisms that feed back to the brain that says, okay, the whole system, put it on limp mode, basically, like those cars, those fancy cars. When something goes wrong in the car, it puts you in a limp mode, basically delivering you 10% of the power that's possible usually. So that's kind of how the nervous system works. It's always geared towards evolution, survival, reproduction, all that kind of stuff. So if you're systemically fatigued in one of those big kind of compound systems, then everything else gets screwed up. So this is where you need to be careful, how you train. There's a saying, I've heard this many times before. Most of your training sessions should be about building strength and not testing strength. So the other day I hit 240, that was a test. It was more so a test than a build. You can't really build much with one rep unless you're doing several 1 rep efforts and accumulating volume. But for that to happen, you need to be working around like 85%, 80% or something like along those lines, or even 90%, but definitely not 100%. So a lot to process here, a lot to think about. I know some of you guys say that squatting for you is that movement that fatigues the hell out of you. Some of you guys say, man, every time I squat, I'm freaking screwed for the whole week. So for people like that, I would recommend, okay, so if that's you, what I would do is increase that frequency and decrease that volume and intensity, because you can't afford to squat once a week and then be screwed for the rest of the week. There's not enough frequency. So for you, over time you kind of work out what's what. If you really get smashed by a particular lift, take it back a notch and add volume through frequency, right? So instead of doing 5 sets of 5 every Monday, do 1 set of 5 at a smaller weight and do it 3 times a week. You know what I mean? So the net volume throughout at the end of the week is higher in the second option than in the first. And you're fresher and all the other stuff, you bench press, all the other lifts kind of you work in as well. So this is something that I've kind of worked out over my time training. As much as I like deadlifting, it is just so damn expensive, man. It is so damn expensive to recovery points, man. Last night I slept like somebody put a bullet in my head. I woke up and I felt like I hadn't moved. I felt like I had pressure sores fucking all over me. That's how fatigued I was. I was coming on the back of a night shift, so circadian rhythm is just taking a dump on me. But yeah, always think about recovery points. A lot of you guys say to me, that come onto the channel for the first time, they're like, man, how the hell do you recover? Well, it's exactly what I just said to you. You need to think about these things. For every rep that you do, you have to think about how you're going to recover from that rep. And for me, squatting every day, squatting to a comfortable single, like I did today, I hit 150. Why didn't I hit 180? I know I can. I don't want to hit 180, man, because I'm not ready, because tomorrow I'm going to be screwed even further. So just be mindful of that. I think we all have different leverages. For me, I'm not all that built for squatting, I guess. I have longer femurs. But I've done a lot of training in the squat. So for me, the squat is a lot easier to recover from. Whereas with the deadlift, maybe my spinal erectors are not that conditioned to this much workload. So historically speaking, every time I do some sort of like bent over motion, like a deadlift, like basically a horizontal starting point, pull, it's very, very taxing for me. And I feel it everywhere. Like the bench press, this 100 kilos moved slowly. The 150 moved slowly. I even thought about doing something else today, but I just thought, nah, I don't want to add any more fatigue into the system. Let's wash this away. Let's recover from this. Let's get my erectors back in the game, because right now, basically, I'm on a limp mode in terms of my performance. Everything's kind of slowing down. So recovery is a big part of my thought process. I'm always thinking about it. Today, what I wanted to do is, I couldn't because of the fatigue. What I wanted to do is work on some upper back movements. I thought about, like deadlift grip with pull-ups. I wanted to do that because I think I've watched that 240 kilo deadlift PR from the other day several times. And what I've noticed is that when I break that floor, when the bar breaks the floor, it kind of gets away from me for a brief moment. And that's not optimal. The bar kind of drifts away from me, and that kind of increases the moment arm, and I'm screwed. I'll show the video here what I mean. The bar kind of drifts away. That puts a longer moment arm to my spine, and that's a harder lift. I think the reason why the bar drifted away from me was because my lats were not strong enough in that moment of time to pull the bar back in. So I wanted to do that today, but it wasn't going to happen. I'm just too fatigued. So that's something down the track I'll do. I'm not sure how frequent I'm going to do that, but I think some upper back training just to have that bar close to me would be more beneficial for me. All right, guys, that's another video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.